At this time, I would like to introduce our speakers, Michael Uperio, Jake Reynolds, Doug Hurd, and Jessica Baer. With that, I'll hand it over to Michael.
All right, thanks, Andrea. Appreciate it. Good morning, good day, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us today, and thanks to our Cisco friends for inviting us to come spend a little bit of time educating you all on how to achieve smarter, faster security with LogRhythm and Cisco integrations. I'm Michael Uperio, Director of Technology Alliances here at LogRhythm. I assume most of you joining already know who LogRhythm is, but if you don't, we're a leading security analytics and next-generation SIEM company that has a wonderful integration story with Cisco. Today, we'll cover some background about the current cybersecurity situation, how to increase your security posture with both LogRhythm and Cisco together, but most importantly, we wanted to show you our technologies live and in real time, seamlessly integrated with one another. So let's get started. All right, before we dive in, I did want to introduce you to the rest of the speakers on today's webinar. From the LogRhythm side, I'll be joined by Jake Reynolds, who is our technical subject matter expert with regards to partner integrations. Now from Cisco, we're lucky to have Doug Hurd, who represents Cisco Security Technology Alliances, and Jessica Baer, Senior Manager of Business Development for Cisco's Advanced Threat Grid Solutions Group around Threat Grid and AMP for endpoints. Worth mentioning that despite Jake and I only being with LogRhythm for a couple years now, Doug and Jessica have had long-standing relationships with LogRhythm dating back well before our time while they were at SourceFire and Threat Grid prior to getting acquired by Cisco. In fact, I think Doug mentioned he remembers working with LogRhythm when we had less than 50 people probably over a decade ago. We've come a long way since then, so pretty neat and shows just how long our companies have been working together. So let's talk about the current cybersecurity situation, and let's agree that the situation is clearly unclear. You've all seen these bullet points before, and I'm sure in many different forms, so I'm not telling you anything you don't already know. The bottom line is this: the cybersecurity situation is getting worse, not better, and there isn't some magic fairy dust that we can sprinkle onto things to improve our security posture. A recent stat I heard said there are over 1,800 plus security vendors out there. I mean, honestly, what's working, what's not? Full visibility oftentimes simply isn't there, and it's not like a truckload of security analysts is all of a sudden going to appear at your doorstep. So security in today's context needs to be smarter, faster, and perhaps incorporate some automation to keep pace with all the motivated cyber threat actors out there. So let's dig into that a little bit. First, let's take a look at the cyber attack lifecycle. Some of you may have heard of the cyber kill chain, right? Basically, this is the same thing. Modern threats take their time and leverage the holistic attack surface, but they typically follow the same form. You're probably familiar with these 6 steps. Starts out with reconnaissance and planning, leads to an initial compromise. Once that initial compromise happened, you've assumed command and control. Then you look to laterally move within the network. And then you look for the target. And if a target is attained, once that target is attained, exfiltration, corruption, disruption happens, right? At this point, you're basically SOL. You might be a headline or a national evening news story at this point. We can all agree that the earlier you can detect and respond to threats or attacks, the more you can minimize damage from them. Which brings me to 2 key metrics: mean time to detect and mean time to respond. Although these should be the primary metrics for which to benchmark your security operations, we're hearing feedback from within the security community from folks like Gartner and executive boards worldwide that these should be considered business metrics tracked by company leadership all the way up to the CEO. So really the punchline is this: 100% pursue prevention-centric security measures, but achieve greater protection through faster detection and response. It's moving towards greater security maturity. As organizations improve their ability to quickly detect and respond to threats, the risk of experiencing a damaging breach is greatly reduced. So let's talk about what are some of the obstacles to faster detection and response. You know, alarm fatigue is a big one. Anyone have issues with not knowing which alarms to tackle first? How about false positives? There can certainly be a lot of noise out there, and sometimes it's just flat out tough to filter through it. Next, swivel chair analysis. Let's all admit, twirling around in your chair is occasionally fun, but having to switch from one disparate product to the next in different UIs, That's no fun. Forensic data silos, having mountains of data, structured or unstructured, without context, coming from a whole bunch of varying sources that are separate from one another. That's not really helpful. Fragmented workflows. We recently had a benchmark study of 750 plus IT and security leaders and found analysts on average were wasting 10 hours a week due to inefficient or ineffective processes and fragmented workflows. Not that we consider a 40-hour work week normal practice really these days, but with there already being a security talent shortfall out there, I'd hope we can improve on dumping a quarter of our mission-critical time into the toilet. And lastly, a lack of automation. Incident response has historically been very manual and takes way too long. Just like how blue players can utilize honeypots or deception technology, cyber adversaries can mimic a minor attack in your network to tie up resources ahead of a grander exploit. They certainly know that time really isn't on defender's side. All right, so I want to take a quick break in the action here with a poll question. Which of these obstacles do you find most hinders your ability to rapidly detect and respond to threats and attacks? Right, so to recap, we have alarm fatigue, swivel chair analysis, forensic data silos, fragmented workflows, and lack of automation. So Sandra's going to pull up a poll question. We'll leave it up for probably about 20, 30 seconds, and then we'll wait and see what the results look like. Looks like the poll has ended. All right, Sandra, let's see the results whenever you get a chance. All right, so I think on the right there, you can probably see the results, and it looks like alarm fatigue and lack of automation are the two biggest obstacles that we're seeing right now. And so that 100% jives with what we're talking about today, which is let's eliminate the noise, let's create more signal, and let's talk about automation. So we just talked about how the security situation is clearly unclear and some of the obstacles to faster detection and response. And frankly, we all know it's not getting any easier, right? So let's take a look at the current manual, time-intensive journey of an IR analyst. Let's take a look at a potential breach event that leads to unanswered questions. So security is largely still a collection of better mousetraps, right? Still a proliferation of multiple security vendors and technologies in customer environments. Now, there's notable gaps. We're still not addressing the need for skilled security analysts for what should be basic forensic and remediation tasks. Now, as far as the current state of security architecture integration, there's absolutely recognition of the need amongst vendors to include LogRhythm and Cisco, but it's largely still piecemeal and pairwise product integrations, right? So the bottom line is this: attacks are multi-vector, and product integrations need to be multi-vector as well, orchestrated and automated to deliver lower ops costs and better protection. Right, so smarter, faster security starts with an effective workflow that spans detection and response. Time to detect is really influenced by 3 steps. It starts with forensic data collection. This comes from security event data, log and machine data, and forensic sensor data. Then you move on to discovery. Here, you use search analytics for behavioral profiling and scenario-based analytics. Now, if and when a threat is discovered, you'll then move on to qualification. You assess the threat, determine risk, and determine if a full investigation is necessary. To the extent a threat is qualified and warrants further response, we transition to the steps that determine time to respond. It starts with further investigation. You analyze the threat and determine the nature and extent of the incident. You then work to neutralize the threat by implementing countermeasures and conducting further mitigation against the threat and risk. Once the threat is neutralized, the recovery phase begins, and that involves cleanup, after-action reporting, and in-depth review if needed, and capturing lessons learned so the team can adapt and continuously improve its security posture. Now let's look at the traditional approach to how SOCs have been run. You have multiple screens with multiple user interfaces and lots of noise for the team. Here's a visual depiction of how lots of folks are managing their security operations today. Disjointed workflows just aren't effective. Poor guy right there in the middle. You know, what this picture isn't showing is this individual's head about to explode and the frustration on his face because he knows he's wasting time trying to manage everything. So here's the LogRhythm approach. We combine many of those disparate yet critical functions into a single pane of glass and give you a platform for which to effectively manage across the entire threat lifecycle and do it end-to-end from forensic data collection all the way to neutralization of threats and recovery. Right, so there's lots of vendors moving towards this platform approach, right? We talked about 1,800 plus vendors. What makes the LogRhythm platform different? LogRhythm is more than just a SIEM, right? We're the epicenter for your next-gen SOC, seamlessly integrating key pillars within your security stack, unifying mission-critical areas such as network, cloud, endpoint, and identity security in an effort to minimize your time to detect and time to respond. Now, our machine data intelligence fabric normalizes and contextualizes data to create a uniform abstraction layer that's primed for both search and machine analytics. We have precision search powered by Elasticsearch that facilitates both structured and unstructured searches, as well as machine-assisted search. With that, you get more signal and less noise with automated investigation, which leads to quicker decisions. Next, LogRhythm provides holistic threat detection, which encompasses user and entity threat detection, network threat detection, and endpoint threat detection, utilizing our real-time scenario-based, advanced correlation engine, and machine learning-based behavioral profiling. With risk-based monitoring, our risk-based prioritization algorithms generate risk-based alarms that focuses analyst time where it matters most and reduces alarm fatigue. Lastly, we have embedded security automation orchestration with our case management functionality and our smart response automation framework that allows automated action to be taken based on context or via an approval chain that could be a click of a button. Most SIEMs can obviously collect logs and machine data, but it's those bidirectional closed-loop security integrations where companies can really distinguish themselves. And we've built a great integration story with Cisco. And so with that, I'll hand it over to Doug to tell you a bit more.
Okay, all right, thank you for that. So let's talk about Cisco and LogRhythm integration and some specifics here. And as was mentioned, I do go back a long way with LogRhythm. At least 10 years ago was probably my first visit to their office in Colorado. And since then, both of our technologies have evolved quite a lot. One of the major differentiators here in our partnership and the nature of the integration is that there's more to Cisco security integrating with LogRhythm than simply getting data into LogRhythm. That's a really big, really important part of it, and I'm going to run through some products here. But there's more to it than that, and I'll expand a little bit as I go through it here. So Cisco Firepower actually generates up to 10 different event types. So when you pull data from this platform into LogRhythm, you're getting IPS information, firewall information, malware, file information, user information, packet, and a number of other different types of events that the LogRhythm can use to do all kinds of correlation and analytics. So we push a very, very rich event set into the platform to give the security analysts the most information and most context to work on. And speaking of context, we also have solid integration with Umbrella. This is a vast database, with a platform with a vast database of domains and IPs that we track in real time thanks to a huge install base and customer base. We're constantly updating the infrastructure with the very latest threats, and LogRhythm users are able to get the most up-to-date information about those bad actors and other hazards on the internet. We're also allowing users to go and do file analysis on demand, to go and look at the dispositions of files for which we don't necessarily know if it's good or bad. And that's where Cisco Threat Grid is an industry-leading analytics or file analytics tool that integrates seamlessly with LogRhythm. So the user can kick a file out and then get back the results of all the analysis that Threat Grid performs on that file. And in addition, Cisco ISE is one of the long-standing integrations with LogRhythm. That's the Identity Services Engine. So the LogRhythm users can get information about all kinds of identity information, posture, that is what the nature of the device is that's connected, what operating system it's running, who the user is, where the device is connecting in. Is it connecting remotely? Is it on the local network? So ISE provides all of this context. So as I was saying about it being more than just getting data into LogRhythm, there are other ways that we work together within the broader ecosystem. The LogRhythm user could be drawing information and context from many other security technologies at the same time as it's pulling information from Cisco, and it can use this information to effectively improve the overall knowledge we have on threats on the internet, and as a result, or through this mechanism, LogRhythm can update Cisco umbrella for customers so that threat defense actually is updated and is able then to be applied to future threats and future actions taken by users on the network. So it's really more than just getting data in, it's also outputting data into those very detection platforms that allow the customer to get better and better security, and as a result, they can reduce the time it takes to detect new things, and again, improve security on an ongoing basis. So let's talk a little bit more about some of these cooperative efforts. Not only does Cisco play well with LogRhythm and vice versa, but we have an extended ecosystem between us where we have many common partners. And as I was mentioning before, it's possible for LogRhythm to pull in information not just from Cisco, but from other ecosystem partners, and then enrich those Cisco technologies, which then again improves overall detection. So this is an example of where I think both LogRhythm and Cisco play really, really well with third-party technologies. We'll even work with competitive technologies when it helps our customers get better overall security. In addition to integration in the form of getting our data into LogRhythm, as well as enriching some of our detection technologies through input from LogRhythm, there is an automated response capability that we've partnered to develop that leverages the Cisco Identity Services Engine. So let me talk a little bit more about ISE. ISE is a powerful next-generation radius authentication technology that does more than check user credentials when somebody comes on the network. It's also looking at, as I mentioned before, what the device is that's connecting, how that device is connecting. We can also look at whether or not that device has other security posture-related things in effect, whereby we can make a decision to allow or not allow something on the network based on all kinds of different criteria. But here's where it gets really, really interesting. What LogRhythm can do through its smart response mechanism is it can use ISE to actually quarantine or knock a user off the network or repolicy a user or a device either manually or automatically. And it doesn't rely on the traditional NAC box or the firewall to be between everything that's good and everything that's bad. LogRhythm can talk to ISE, and ISE can go right down to a switch or a router and surgically remediate or take action against that threat, that device that may be compromised. So I'm going to hand the ball back now, and I'll stop right there.
All right. Yeah, thanks, Doug. So that's really just the tip of the iceberg, right? The previous slides highlighted a few of our integrations. In reality, we have over 50 touch points between the Cisco product suite and LogRhythm, right? So if you take a look At the left here, you can see our integration span Cisco enterprise networking hardware, Cisco security hardware and software, etc., throughout the entire technology stack, right? So when you combine our multiple platforms together, what you're able to achieve is unparalleled closed-loop automation, event creation, analysis, action, and smarter, faster security. Right, so with that, I'll hand it over to Jake Reynolds so you can see all this in action.
All right, let me get my screen shared. All right, so we'll run through a little scenario today, right? We'll say I'm a SOC analyst, and you know, we're coming in after the weekend, and you know, we're going to sit down and get a lay of the land, see where we are with the environment. Typically, you know, we've got standard dashboards that we can use to get a quick summary of how things look in our environment, see trends, that kind of data, and it's really fast and easy to do a quick long tail analysis, right? If a certain log source is suddenly chattier than another, that could be indicative of an issue. But as a SOC analyst, I'm going to spend most of my day looking at alarms, especially if, in this case, we'll say I am a Tier 1 SOC analyst. So I want to adjust my view a little bit, only take a look at alarms that haven't been touched yet, or at least aren't closed. Look in the last day, and everything here is ordered by risk. So every log that comes into the platform gets a risk-based priority, and this carries over across our analytics into the alarms. Now, right away, if we order by risk, we can quickly decide what do we want to deal with first. And we've got a fairly high-risk alarm right here that is what we call a progression alarm. And in this case, our progression alarms map to that cyber threat lifecycle that we mentioned earlier. And if we forget where we're at with this, we can quickly take a look at what's involved and what the logic is behind this alarm, right? So in this case, progression alarms look for phases of that attack lifecycle that are keyed to either users or, in this case, specific hosts, right? So if I need a refresher for this specific rule, where we are within that lifecycle, I can come and take a look at the individual logic for our scenario-based analytics to see what's going on. In this case, there's been evidence of recon, command and control, and a compromise on this particular machine, and it's been followed up by detection of lateral movement, right? So let's dig a little deeper, right? We want to take a look at this, figure out, you know, is it panic time, or you know, go ahead and qualify this alarm. So we could do a drill down search and right away take a look at the individual events associated with this. And what we see is our users involved, endpoints, really quickly get an overall view of our log messages that are involved with this, and then take a look at more detail through this view if we need to. And right away we can see, you know, around this time frame, around 1044 is our first event, and comes up to about 1047, right? So at this point, I might say, well, I kind of want to, I'm going to need to dig into this, right? So we're going to start a new case, which takes us about 2 clicks, and we can pre-populate that case data. Priority is calculated based on the risk-based priority, and we'll pull in some general data about that alarm, but we can tune this if we need to. We can also set a due date further out if it's a lower priority, etc. So I'm going to go ahead and get this alarm started. And at this point, I also have a time frame from our earlier search. So I might order by time frame and switch to a view that's a little bit easier to take a look at what I'm looking at. So in this case, we've got our date times here, and I know that these cases are all involved starting around 1044. So I can quickly add all of these alarms to the case that I'm working so that they're all in one place for me to interact with, drill down on, and in this case, I'm going to ask for help, right? This looks like this is a pretty complex series of events, and as a Tier 1 SOC analyst, I may not know enough about the environment to make a call on some of this. So I'm going to add a collaborator, and we'll pick one of our senior SOC analysts to give us a hand, and I'm going to add a note so that when he gets his email, he'll get an email with a link to this case. He knows what's going on. Say, I'll ask him to look into the scope and scale of the lateral movement while I start on patient 0. So now we have a note. This goes into this shared evidence locker that we can both work within to go ahead and collaborate on this case in one place. And just in case he's not looking at his console or at the alarms and cases tab, he's going to get an email where he can right away click over and come take a look at this case. So he'll have the note that I've got in here, the alarms that I've added, and he can go ahead and update this himself, right? So we've got a case created. He's got notes, and I'm going to want to go ahead and escalate this into an incident since we're digging in here. Hold on, I am fighting with my keyboard shortcuts. Here we go. So at this point, our advanced analyst, he's gonna dig through this activity and say, well, there's evidence of internal reconnaissance, right? And if we want an idea of what this actor's doing in the environment, we'll start there. So we'll start with a drill down search to look at those individual events in a moment, but we can take a look again, see hosts involved, and potential actions that we might be able to take while we're working this alarm. We've got results back already, so we can come in and take a look and see that in this case, we've probably got a Cisco router reporting net flow at one of the transition points between segments, and that's gone ahead and told us that we've got what looks like a port scan going on. Right away we get those ports involved. In this case, it looks like we've got a single host pinging or kind of probing a separate single host. Well, I want to get an idea of what kind of trouble I'm in now, right? So I know that this right now is pretty limited to these two devices. So I want to get some context on what we've got here, right? So we've got a server, we get all of our entity information, where these things might live. For Windows devices, we can query Active Directory and pull that information. So right at your fingertips, you can make a call as to what am I looking at, what might I need to worry about. In this case, I want to figure out if this device is vulnerable. So I know that we scan our IP range once a day. So I'm going to add this host, and the interface can will let us work directly with the metadata in here to create a search without having to figure out esoteric things like log entry names and specific status codes, etc. So in this case, I want to find out for both of these devices what the threat landscape is. So I can go and do a search for classification. This looks at that broader metadata type, and we'll get back any vulnerability data that we know within the system, so that we can take a look at it and figure out if we need to worry. At the same point, I want to bring this evidence of this port scan in and work that with our cases. And my case needs to get assigned to me since I was working on something else at the same time. So now I can quickly go ahead and add these logs. I can put a note here if that makes sense for tracking this, and then we'll go in and take a look at our results for our vulnerability data. So in this case, we've got some Qualys data on our hosts. We can choose different ways to render this data so that it's most useful to us while we're looking. And in this case, we see there's a couple of RDP vulnerabilities on this workstation. It's no surprise maybe that it was compromised, but really there's only one vulnerability related to this other Linux host, and that's on OpenSSH. So that is a concern because port 22 was involved with this. So I can go ahead and look directly at my log data and pivot from there into taking a look at all of our all of the data across this since this event started and maybe up until now. And then dig in and decide, you know, are we potentially compromised? Is there something we need to worry about? And this particular one should give us some session data on logins. Oh, no, in this case I've got strictly my vulnerability data. But you get the idea. We can pull all this together in one spot and put our evidence directly into this case, right? So I might go ahead and close this internal port scan alarm and add a note. Only one port vulnerable. We'll add authentication data. Right? Now, while Chris is digging into this and figuring out where to go next, let's take a look at what I've been up to during all this time. So we can collaborate in real time, and updates that they make end up over here just about as fast as we can make them. Now, in this case, we've got evidence of lateral movement, right? This is a relatively complex case, and one of the first things I might want to do is try and put that end device on lockdown, and this is where ISE comes in. We've got a smart response that can reach out to ISE directly and ask it to go ahead and quarantine this device, right? Now, this can be fully automated if you trust in the analytics, if you've got buy-in from the executive level, and if you accidentally quarantine a CEO's device, and that's okay, then we can go fully automated. But sometimes you want a human being to intervene and make sure that this action is going to be all right. And in this case, you know, I'm the only person who needs to approve this, but we can get up to 3 levels of quorum approval, right? So maybe a Tier 2, Tier 3 analyst needs to get the okay. We get the results from our API call, and I'll go ahead and add that to the case so that we can refer to that later. We've also got our evidence of PowerShell tunneling in one of these alarms, right? So in this case, I'm going to see if I can get those individual alarms or that individual activity data. And let's get a look at the specifics. In this case, we've got one of our network monitor alarms, and it's picking up evidence of an ICMP tunnel. We can look at that raw log message right here and see, yeah, there's plain text here in this ICMP packet, which is pretty abnormal for something that's usually used for ping and trace route. And I can also do a further drill down search to that particular flow entry and download the PCAP to attest to this case if I think it's necessary. And again, 2 clicks to go ahead and add that evidence to the case. So while I'm in here, I can also take a look at what smart response actions we've got available. In this case, we've got our ISE action that I know that we've already executed. So I might go ahead and close this down since I brought the evidence in, and move further down, right? We're working backwards to kind of deal with the highest priority first. Now, we know Umbrella's done its job, right, because this is picking up a list of blocks, right? So Umbrella's blocked this. I'm going to start a drill down search so that evidence is there for me to work with later. But I want to take a look at the initial point of entry first. So we do a drill down here, and we can take a look at our NGFW logs from our Cisco environment. And that gives us some of the particular HTTP telemetry, right? We can look at those individual calls get data directly from that, whether or not it was successful. In this case, we've got a malicious, what looks like a malicious host name, and we can confirm that in a moment. Right away, we get some threat intelligence context, right? So this domain exists within the threat grid remote access Trojan list within our environment. So one of the things I can do is right away query out the threat grid and get this data, right? We've got our threat score, some of the hashes involved, and I might take this host name, and if I want to do a little deeper digging, pivot into here. And I will let Jessica take it from here, since she knows this much better than I do.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jake. Appreciate your partnership. So I'm going to share my screen here. So this, you pivoted into the search in the threat grid on that domain, and we can see some information about that, including related IP addresses. And these are IP addresses that have been seen by samples in the threat grid from many different sources. Also, who is information, and this is being pulled from Umbrella, and it's included here at no additional cost as part of the Cisco integration and bringing all the products together. So as Jake saw, there was this IP address that was communicating one of the ones here. So I can click on that and get more information about that IP address, including where it's going to out there to LogRhythm, the related domain, which is the one that we're investigating, and then also see related samples, those samples that we're actually communicating with that IP address, including we can see that there are a number of behavioral indicators, actions by that particular sample, with the highest being 100. So what we might want to do is click on that and dig into it to understand a little bit more about what's going on. So I've done that, and I can see here that it has a threat score of 100. That's the highest level can be, absolutely no malicious. And the reason why is because of the behavior that is observed, and one of those is that our senior research engineers, malware analysts, incident responders have been able to see how this particular dark comet remote access Trojan operates, and then also that this mutex is. So it's really easy for a hacker to change the hash value, just change one single bit, but it's a lot more work to change the mutexes, which is its naming and place within inside the memory of where it operates. That's a lot more development. So we're able to see families of malware based on that mutex. In this case, we detect that it is a variant of this particular access Trojan by that mutex. Also, we detected that it was this possible cybergate. Now, because Cisco is part of that open platform with Clam AV, and we contribute to VirusTotal, we're also able to pull that in for you at no additional cost as well. So we can see some of the artifacts that have been identified that as well. That in itself brings up to 95, but these particular mutexes brings all the way up to 100. We also see some other behaviors such as this code injection, also the way that it's process hollowing. If you have no idea what process hollowing is, that's okay, because in plain English, it explains to us what's going on there. So there's a number of other things that it's doing, including is changing the auto run so that every time it loads up for persistence. So that's the real power of threat grid, is based on these behaviors. But we also will talk about and show you the DNS traffic and the TCP/IP streams, the communication from that sample out to that area on in the internet. So here we see this is that's one that we were alerted to. And what I can do actually is pivot into go and search for look at Umbrella for that. Before I do, I'm just going to show a couple of things as well that you have with the threat grid report. And that's that you can also look at the processes, the artifacts that they drop, as well as the changes to the registry and the changes to the file system. You also can play back the video as well. And you can look at the process tree and actually see what those changes are and download that as well. It's really easy to do the downloads here as well. So let's go ahead and pivot into Umbrella and understand more about this. So this would be just a right-click with our plugin and going over to that Umbrella search here. So we can see that it was indeed blocked. We can also see the DNS queries that have occurred, get that historical understanding and associated samples. We also have pulled up the report here for the IP address and the malicious domains, how this is all correlated together. Going into that particular sample, here we see what we're looking at, and then viewing that full sample data and threat grid, that brings us back around to where we were. some things I just want to highlight as well from Umbrella. So that's this investigate. We also have what's called the protect level, this dashboard here, and you can actually see the different blocks that occurred here, including integrations with RecRid and other products, and understand the types of blocking that happened. We're just going to move back to ThreatGrid for one moment here to the main dashboard and just highlight some of the things that are new and then give it back over to Jake. So with this, there's something such as submit sample. Windows 10 is now available as well. In addition, we have a number of playbooks, and these are all documented under the help section over here. Different playbooks for automated interaction with samples, also where the connection is going out from the internet to the command and control server, so you can control that as well. And of course, we're always adding new sample types and new behavioral indicators. The new dashboard is really exciting, the way that you're able to see the previews of the different samples that have been run as well. You can have a lot of control over which samples you see, and you can really easily drill down into these samples, such as the ones that have been submitted that have this high threat score, and dig into that. But I'm going to stop sharing and give it back over to Jake to wrap up now that we have greater understanding about what threat we're dealing with here.
All right. I'm going to get my screen shared back out, and we'll pick up where we left off. So in this case, you know, Jessica did a great job showing off what a Tier 2, Tier 3 analyst might dig into. I'm mostly just collecting this stuff for evidence, taking a quick qualification and digging into this incident. So I'm going to add this to the case, and that goes right over in here with our case notes. So at this point, I might want to make a call as to what we're going to do with this. Right, we have two smart response actions that I can take with this. One of them is already pivoting out to bring in contextual information in case it's an integration that we don't have directly through our threat intelligence API. But in this case, I might have more gateways out on my network, more firewalls than just where this one traversed. So I can, again, approve a smart response that will SSH into one of the local ASAs. And again, ISE pops up yet again, right? This is being able to quarantine remotely at the user or IP MAC address level is extremely useful, and so it's leveraged pretty heavily. So I'll come back in here, and once we get the result of our smart response action, which is still pending, it takes a while to turn up that connection, log into the ASA, get our enabled privileges, and go ahead and add this to a block list. But we've got all of the scripted actions. This one uses PowerShell with an SSH plugin, and right away can tell us whether or not it was succeeded and what phases along the way it got through. Right. So again, I might close that as I'm working my way through and come and take a look at our DNS results. Get these log entries in here, and I'll probably want to triage them right off the bat. I can do that manually here with the raw log entries, or take a look at, again, we can render all of our log data in various ways. So in this case, I can see the domains that were involved with this, and the time frame as they were pinged, right, when those calls made, and the categories that came up for that blocked attack, right? So this is a C2 trying to get out and not quite making it, right? So we'll go ahead and add this evidence to our case again. And maybe we're getting near to wrapping this up. This is almost all the alarms that we've looked at. Let's double check here and make sure that we've got all the data we want, though. In this case, if I wanted to, I can ask Active Directory to disable that end user's account, right? Maybe if I'm worried about that account being compromised, it's certainly a probability at this case, since they were trying to pivot out of the box. One would think that they have his credentials. So I might go ahead and execute that and then take a look from there. So, once we've gotten those things locked down, we can move the case to a mitigated state, right? At this point, I might add a note mentioning that we've locked these devices down, we've collected all the evidence, but we're not going to mark it resolved just yet because we might have an after-action report for the end of the day or the end of the week, depending on our process. So, but one of the things that I can do is, later on when we're doing that after-action report, we can come in. We've got all of our evidence in one place, all of the alarms associated with it, all of the logs that got added, any notes. We can associate cases for complex issues. We can associate cases to each other, kind of have a relationship between them, and they all go into one container that's easily exportable for work with either a law enforcement agency or your legal departments if needed. During that after-action report, we can also take a look at the full case history, kind of an audit-level log of who did what and when, and look at our metrics. In this case, we've got our earliest evidence in the case was around 10:44. Took around 43 minutes to get us to create the case, and time to respond is about 20 minutes, right? So not too bad compared to some dwell time that's out there. At this point, maybe I'll mark it resolved. It looks like one alarm was left open, so I didn't do a good job of cleaning up after myself. And I might add some resolution notes here, something like, end user, maybe he was got hit by a watering hole attack, so end user was referred for security awareness training. We can add that note, go ahead and resolve it, and there we go, we're done. So we'll pivot back to Michael and his slides real quick, and I'll do a quick recap of where we are. Is that sharing yet? There we go. So again, we had one centralized unified environment where we can quickly coordinate with multiple people in the SOC and gives us centralized visibility across all of the Cisco log data that we bring in and have a single stored evidence locker. We're able to quickly neutralize threats using our smart response actions across the Cisco security portfolio in our environment. And again, minimize our time to detect and time to respond because we have one single workflow and one single user interface, right? And gives us one place that, as a Tier 1 SOC analyst, I didn't need to be trained on the ASA to know how to SSH in and add a device to that block list and maybe accidentally turn off VLAN trunking, since I don't know what I'm doing in there. But able to very quickly respond to things and do only what I need to do to get my job done. So with that, I'll give it back to Michael.
All right, thanks, Jake, for that great demo. Appreciate that. So in closing, let's go back to the earlier slide around the journey an analyst takes post a potential breach event and see how his day changes with automation and a well-integrated security stack. Right, so since Jake did the demo earlier, let's say Jake is the analyst. Jake gets to the office, stumbles across that same breach event. This time around, much of the research and digging that he had to go through is integrated into a single platform and things are automatically done for him. Instead of looking at several different screens, Jake just has to look at one. Instead of uncovering more and more questions, he's now finding answers. Right, so instead of hours or days focusing on the event, he's able to get the answers he needs in a fraction of the time, allowing him to move to the next threat at hand, right? So it's 4 p.m. for Jake, and instead of dreading the event backlog, he's now thinking about family dinner and where they're going to do dinner together tonight. The net of this smarter, more intelligent approach is this. Threat complexity necessitates smarter, faster security now more than ever. The cybersecurity situation is going to remain unclear. Open platforms with robust integration frameworks lay the foundation for a true security ecosystem, for true technology teamwork. Context exchange and services sharing is key not only to enabling successful and meaningful automation, but also having a successful security practice. There we go. So for the security analyst, once we give him the framework and system to achieve, he can truly live a happier, less stressful life, minimize the noise, minimize that mean time to detect. And so ultimately, at the end of the day, that's what we're all after is that happier life. All right, so with that, I appreciate your time today. Looks like we did leave a little bit of time for questions. There were some questions around, hey, are there any technical guides available to walk through these integrations? 100%. We put the LogRhythm Marketplace up here. A lot of these technical guides are also available if you're an existing customer through the LogRhythm community. But either way, yeah, we'll get you what you need from a documentation perspective. Want to make sure you have what you need. And we'll take some time for questions. I think we have a few minutes.
Yeah, we have a couple of outstanding questions. One of them is being answered right now. The question that isn't, though, is as follows. Okay, I think you just covered it, actually. There was a question about technical guides and a walkthrough for the setup. There's also a question about getting this presentation after the webinar. Can we distribute the presentation?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So after this, the webinar will be available on demand, and then the presentation itself, we're happy to distribute. So if some of the partners on the call, reseller partners, if they're looking to use the deck as an enablement guide or sales enablement materials, happy to do that for you.
All right, good. Another question, can you send a white paper and presentation concerning integrations? I think that might be a similar question to the one asked a few minutes ago, which was, are there any technical guides that can walk through the setup of these integrations?
Yep, so we've written technical documentation. I'm not sure if we actually have any technical white papers per se. I'm looking at Jake right now. To try to remember our inventory of what we might have with regards to white papers around the integrations. But yeah, we've absolutely built as far as understanding, the use cases that these integrations solve, kind of the problem and the challenge and the solution, and then how to configure these after the fact. There's documentation out there regarding that.
Yeah, we don't have anything as in-depth as a white paper at the moment, but as we build out more interesting and complex use cases, that is something that is on our radar.
Okay, thanks. The person asking the question says that there's value in getting documentation purely on integration, even if it's not in a white paper form. So
right.
Was there a link, or there's this link here on the closing slide? Are there any other links you want to call out where any of the attendees here who want to get docs can go, in addition to the one that's on the slide?
So if I can answer that, if they go to that link, then there's a place on there. Michael, you can give me the ball if you'd like, and I can just show it real quick what some of the resources are available and walk them through.
Yeah, go ahead, Sandra. Would you mind handing it over to Jessica so she can preview the marketplace?
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
So here's the page that we're talking about. You can come and request information here, and that goes directly to our partners at LogRhythm, and you can put what it is that you're looking for. And then also you can go to their website, and then here's the resources that we were talking about here. You can see some of the ones there, as well as you can see the compatibility certifications that have occurred. So those are some of the resources that are available to you. If you go to that http://cs.co/LR, this is where it comes to.
Yeah, and in addition to those PDFs that are posted up there, our community site may maintain more bleeding edge documents, maybe things that aren't ready for super broad release, or in the case of some of these smart responses, I'll work directly to maybe post a smart response, have a forum post about requirements, how to push that out, what needs to be done. And so we'll make sure that there's a link to, it's community.logrhythm.com, but we'll make sure that there's a link to that on that cs.co/LR site.
Okay, great. There's another question here. Can LogRhythm generate a nice incident report with all the details in a case? The use case here would be to mirror information about the incident to their help desk, so that they could archive it.
Absolutely. With the latest version of our platform, the 7.3 version, we've got better API support. We're getting more and more API support as we move on. beyond that, but we also have the ability to plug Kibana directly into our Elasticsearch backend. And so with that, you can kind of put together any use case that comes to mind. But our case API is anything that you can do within our interface, you can do from the case API. And so you could very easily come up with something that says, hey, give me a list of closed cases, and migrate those cases from the LogRhythm environment to the production ticketing environment. And my previous background is telecom, and in one of those spaces, if we were investigating legal or IT, we had a separate ticketing system for that very reason.
All right. Not seeing any other questions. That looks like the last one, unless any questions pop up right away. That is it.
Great. I see Sandra just joined.